1 minute, directors. Good afternoon, directors. So I'd like to call the January 10th inaugural meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee to order. And the first order of business is the election of chair for 2024. And for those who may not be familiar, our process will call for nominations from the floor. And if there's more than one nominee, proceed with a secret ballot. Otherwise, we'll proceed with nominations at this time. For chair.
Make a motion for Matthew Jack to be chair of this committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Vanesh. Director Jack, would you accept that nomination?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there further nominations for the position of chair? For the third and last time, nominations for chair? Hearing none, we'll declare Director Jack elected as chair by acclamation for 2024. Thank you. And now, if I could please ask for nominations for the position of vice chair?
I'll nominate Robin Mawhinney.
Director Mawhinney, would you accept that nomination?
Second. I certainly would. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? For the third and last time? Hearing none, we'll declare Director Mawhinney elected as vice chair for 2024. Thank you very much. Now we'll turn it over to the newly elected chair. Director Jack, would you like to come up here to the chair's position? You might find it easier to run the meetings from this position.
It's not a roughest crowd if you're either.
Yeah.
Matthew, do you want to borrow my?
Let's see.
Do you want to borrow my?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Where do I start?
So we're on E right now, First Nations Territorial Acknowledgement. So if I can get you a paper copy as well.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I guess to start, just thank you for this honor. I'm greatly honored, and just to acknowledge that we are located in the traditional territory of Liquitas-speaking people.
Yeah, you can read it off here if you want.
And then moving on to F, adoption of the public agenda. The agenda for the January 10th, 2024 inaugural meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee to be adopted as presented.
Move adoption.
Second.
Who was that? Sorry, I'm
Martin Davis. Martin Davis moved it.
Mark?
Martin.
Moved by Mark,
Martin. And seconded by Robin.
seconded by Robin. Thank you.
So just call the question, the vote.
Call a question to all in favor? Thank you.
Any opposed?
Any opposed?
Carried.
Seeing none, carrying on. Moving on to G, petitions and delegations. There are none.
We have none today.
Moving on to adoption of minutes. The minutes of the regular meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee held on November 22nd, 2023 will be adopted as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Julie, seconded by Robin. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? So moved. Thank you. Business arising from minutes. Following the adoption of the previous minutes, the chair will provide an opportunity for directors to introduce further resolutions in respect of the matters contained in the minutes that are not otherwise scheduled for consideration on the current agenda.
Doesn't look like it.
Nobody? Thank you. Chair reports, I guess none today.
You have the pulpit. Could mention what troubles you went through to get here today.
Yeah, no, it's a good travel to get here. Left this morning, so again, I'm very honored to sit in this position, and good to see everyone here today. So with that, moving on to staff reports. Number one, Strathcona Regional District commitment to First Nations reconciliation.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I believe as Lee will speak to this report.
I'm going to jump in first. Good afternoon, everyone. The report before you is to consider next steps to formalize the SRD's commitment to reconciliation through the development of a First Nations relations engagement framework. And this came about, there was a resolution in November to provide a report on the next steps to start implementing DRIPA and the UNDRIP recommendations. And in the report, I provided a brief summary about the work that we are doing that does align with UNDRIP and the calls to action. And in October 2023, we provided a bit of a work plan on a process to develop a First Nations relations engagement framework. And I think that may get you what you want in terms of itemizing an action plan with some timelines and some recognition of UNDRIP and DRIPA and how we are and how we will be in the future, meeting those alignments with the TRC and UNDRIP. And the framework would involve significant engagement with local First Nations so that we can create a shared vision with the local First Nations that are within the boundaries of the SRD. And it would provide direction for the SRD to look at the policies, the bylaws, and approaches with an Indigenous lens and the UN Declaration, and adjust them where needed. So in October, we did provide that process where we're talking about training, developing a scope of work, research with other local governments who are doing similar work, and pursuing additional funding so that we can do a fulsome framework that we can adopt here at the SRD, as well as, hire a content expert to assist in the development of that framework. And so today, I just wanted to engage in conversation with you about what that looks like, and if you want to proceed with the development of the framework.
So I'm seeing two recommendations, two options in the report. And option A looks quite a bit like option B, except for the looking for provincial and federal funding. When I read the report and I came here today, I was wondering why those two things were separate and why they weren't combined in one resolution, or how the committee felt about combining those two, that we could do the work as planned, but also while that's happening, looking for funding for specifics.
So maybe I'll just answer that quickly. Our intention was that you could adopt both of them, one or both. That's why I didn't combine it. And the other one is just that it does take resources. I mean, I support it. I think it's a great idea, but it takes resources to commit to pursuing that, and just wanted the endorsement of the committee and the board that we're to put those resources into finding some financial support.
If I, for a follow-up, then is this an opportunity then to use both of those resolutions? Because the second resolution would be the one that would be needed in order to get a grant.
Yeah, so A and B, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work on this. I think it's great that we're moving forward with this. When I made the initial motion for this, I was really looking for steps that we can actually take to implement. I think it's really important to have a First Nations engagement framework and how we engage First Nations within the district. I think that's key, and I think we should be doing that. And I think what I was really looking for in that motion was more around what are the steps that we can actually take to enact DRIPA and UNDRIP. My concern, I think, is that around this sort of work, Indigenous peoples and First Nations have been engaged a lot, and the result of that has been the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action that came out of that. And I think would love this committee to consider moving forward on what are the steps we can actually take based on the engagement that's already been happened. There's been lots of calls for things that we can do, and wondering if we can have suggestions on what areas we can begin moving forward on.
If I can, Mr. Chair, before Azalee or Renee speaks, I think there's a couple things. One, we actually have started doing some stuff. First Nations Relations Quarter, there's very few governments that have got to the point of hiring that. So we have done that. As you know, we're engaging on training and education. And there are a number of the calls to actions that relate to local government specifically. And I think what our work here as Azalee is to do is bring those that impact local government or local government can be impacted by them, and bring recommendations forward on how we can support that. So that this is part of that, of looking for endorsement to keep going, and how, what are we going to adopt, right? Like, what are we going to move forward with, and having the support of this committee as a lead brings them forward. I mean, I think this is going to take every meeting for the entire term to keep working through all these things. So our plan is to kind of chip away at those things and continually bring action items forward. Azalee, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
So when I'm hearing the word engagement strategy, it doesn't mean necessarily just our strategy for engaging with Indigenous people on these lands, but it's around the engagement that SRD does around enacting the recommendations for change that are being called for?
Yeah, I would say so. There's a lot of things, if you look at the calls to action, there's a lot of things that will have an impact to the regional district through a number of ways, some of them resources, but bringing those forward and identifying what those impacts are and what the direction is. One of the easy low-hanging piece of fruit I keep referring to is that, so when we First Nations consultation, for example, we'll have a land use application and we'll send those out to groups, including First Nations. We don't really have any direction, let's say, from the board. If the First Nation comes back and says they love it or they hate it, do we just go with that? Like, what is the decision-making process? How do we respect that? How do we engage with that? We don't really have a framework for a whole bunch of these things, and our work plan is to untangle that ball of wool and those things that impact local government, bring them and get board direction on how we deal with those things. There's lots of them. And so continuing bringing that stuff forward to this committee, getting their input, their feedback, what support, bringing those to the board and seeing if the board supports these as a whole, because a lot of them are going to have an impact on resources and they're going to take resources as well. So is the board committing to those things? So.
Yes, thank you. So in the staff report, we had mentioned some of the projects that the SRD that is in alignment with DRIPA. Well, it's not officially in a framework. We have the areas that we are in alignment with DRIPA. If you look at the action plan, which is through the province, but we are a regional district. We are different. But the items that are in alignment is having this First Nation Relations Committee. My position as the First Nation liaison is in alignment with DRIPA. Also, the cultural competency training, and when we went out to Cayucit for a C2C, that is in alignment with the DRIPA and building relations and understanding shared responsibility. So this list is not exhaustive, but then we start to pick out, look at the different departments and how we can increase our competency and alignment with DRIPA. And so that's where we're seeking some outside help, and we ask the board to apply for funding and have support with that, because it is, there are other governments that are in the same position. We are unique as a regional government, and I don't want to get into details, but I am looking at collaborating with other regional governments that are doing this work and learning about best practices. And it is a bit time consuming, but we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess this is a question through to staff, and this might help inform all of us, and especially newer members. What is the process right now for the various First Nations within this regional district to become members of the regional district directly? Because that certainly is in line with what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's an easy one. So they need to be treaty First Nations, first of all, and then within their treaty, and in this regional district, KCFN's treaty was finalized, and then they had a window of time for them to join the regional district. And then once we got close to the end of that line, we went through the process and they joined. But we have two opportunities for First Nations. One, again, treaty First Nations. And within their treaties, they, as I understand, they all have, for lack of a better word, and it's included in that they join the regional government. But aside from that, if they're non-treaty First Nations, or they haven't finalized their treaty, is that we've invited them and continue to invite them to sit as observers. KCFN, as you know, sat as an observer at this table for many years before they joined. And we continue to reach out to the nations and invite them to sit and participate as non-voting participants.
So at this point, like I remember how that process happened, are we continuing to invite First Nations within the regional district to sit as observers here? Because I don't see other First Nations represented in that capacity.
Yes, we do invite them, encourage them. They just haven't bid on that yet, I guess. But again, that's like, as Elise says, it's a part of a relationship building and get the comfort level and the understanding that they want to participate. It's not just sending out a letter and saying, hey, do you want to participate, and then not hearing back from them. It's part of our continued engagement and our hope that they will come and sit as observers and eventually join.
Okay, if I could.
Just a reminder, sorry, not to cut you off, just one thing. There is only 2 regional districts, just so you know, in the entire province that have First Nations on their board, and it's us and Alberni Clayoquot.
Okay, thanks for that. Further to that, in terms of having other First Nations participate even as observers, do we offer any sort of compensation to make that possible for them to do that? Because they might have capacity issues around that.
I think we could speak to that, but I'm not sure that you're aware that this is an item on the agenda to follow the staff reports.
Oh, sorry.
So I think there'd be a deeper discussion about those issues at that time.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to also reflect to Martin that in the staff report, if you scroll down a little bit, there were motions made in June that we could have a report on how the regional district can meaningfully engage with First Nations, given the capacity issues they face, including compensation for their time, and that we consider an advisory group at the regional district. And I think if, according to the agenda, Director Colburn is going to have another motion regarding that later today. I also wanted to say that I really, I tend to agree with Director Vanesh and maybe it was my interpretation of this report that I thought that an engagement framework was really sort of setting us up to create a framework for how to continue or how to increase government-to-government engagement. And I did notice in one line in the report that it mentions that report mentions that page 2, it talks about the Truth and Reconciliation call to action for all levels of government to adopt UNDRIP. And I think that maybe there are other steps and other things that we could be doing, looking inward, as well as creating a framework for engagement. I think that we can acknowledge that there is that it's a lot to ask of nations to continue to engage with us, and maybe sometimes it would be helpful if we were also demonstrating our own leadership and work on doing pieces that we can manage here. There was that report from or memorandum or whatever it was from the BC Indian chiefs that sort of actually detailed all of the different things that local governments could be doing regarding the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action and which ones were applicable to local governments. So as well as perhaps an engagement framework, I would really like to consider what else we could be doing. And one further question I wanted to ask is that this report really talks about $25,000 being the included, maybe potentially already included in the 2024 budget. And I was curious on the staff opinion on the likelihood that that is an adequate number for the budget, considering the ideas that you may have that are coming.
So maybe I'll answer the first part and then Renee can answer the second one. And this is just a bit of a history lesson on when the regional district decided to, and hopefully Director Colburn can support me on this, when we went with the First Nations Relations Coordinator. So on Azalee's role here is that Azalee has 5 days in the week. 3 of those are dedicated to being the First Nations Relations Coordinator. She's always that, but 1 day a week she is solid waste, and 1 day a week she is dedicated to Connected Coast. The support for that was because Connected Coast touches 44 First Nations and it again engages us with quite a depth of First Nations and creates deeper relationships beyond this regional district. Solid waste is also something that reaches beyond the boundaries of here, and there's a large contingent of nations there as well. And the board, when we decided to fill the position of First Nations Relations Coordinator, it was always the intent or the direction that it be someone with First Nations heritage, and that the board would take direction from that person on kind of how this stuff unfolds. And it's not maybe as typical as how local government would do business, is that, roll out a business plan and we're going to do X, Y, Z. It would come out more organically. So this board has tried to take more direction about how that unfolds from the coordinator, because it may be on different timelines than we're used to with different groups. So not saying that we're always going to meet the expectations, but I don't know, Julie, if I'm kind of characterizing it appropriate enough, but kind of letting the coordinator unfold or reveal itself for us on whatever timeline that may be. I don't know if that answers part A of your question, but it was a bit of a history lesson on what direction we follow and the pace that we follow and what we, what kind of order of things that we try and tackle some of the relationship and the work we're doing with nations. There's a lot of silence, but Okay, Renee. the
Okay, if I can
25,000.
just add a little bit of context, and maybe it's the nuance in the name of putting engagement in within the framework. I think if, we even just narrowed it down and put First Nations Relations Framework, because a lot of what you articulated is what we are researching and would envision in the framework. It's not just about how we're going to engage, but to develop that framework, we do need to engage with the First Nations and be on the same path and including things in that framework that they are interested in participating and advancing as well. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the word engagement, because it is more of a fulsome picture of all the work that we would be doing at the SRD and reviewing our policies and procedures, many of the items that you just articulated. So as part of the process, we're doing, some research on what a framework could look like, who out there could assist us, and as part of that research, we're fine-tuning a budget. The $25,000 that's currently proposed in the 2024 budget is the same funding that we had in 2023. So we will need to seek additional funding from, there's UBCM C2C grants, and hopefully through the provincial or federal government, who are also encouraging local governments to commit to aligning with UNDRIP and DRIPA, that there would be some other programs that we could apply for to make this work happen.
I also want to remind us about, who we are and what we are and what we do just as regular business. So I think we do a really good job at this already, but maybe it would help not necessarily to, I'm reluctant to say blow your own horn or anything like that, but maybe it would help in our reports to have the actual items under the calls to action that it relates to. So for example, in our section about intergovernance implications or something like that, maybe, because then that would let us remind us all of what we are doing to actually put those things in action. There's tsunami signs that went up in Ukliji in Nuu-chah-nulth language that were done by Protective Services. That is providing, using language of the people who's the territory that we're on. These are all action things that we are doing. So I don't know if that would help to kind of remind us, because I do understand the need to do it, but I think we do it so much as regular business that we kind of forget that these are the things we're doing all the time, that's the lens that we're looking through as a region. So it's a suggestion, not for any recognition, but maybe just for a reminder to us that we are actioning these items.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good. That's a good piece of advice there. We can certainly do that. And it is our intention, it helps us for ASLI to bring forward a work plan that relates to the calls to action in DRIPA, and so kind of that we can measure maybe some more of our accomplishments and the timeline that we're going to try and work through that. So that is in the works for sure.
If I understand what Director Coburn was saying, for example, the Connected Coast. So part of the DRIPA provincial action plan is to increase education through high-speed internet to all coastal First Nations or British Columbia First Nations. The Connected Coast is highly in alignment with DRIPA for that. So it wasn't too extensive, but there is a list in your staff report, like I said, where we are in alignment. What is the next steps is what we're planning on doing is to, I'm not going to say where we're not in alignment. That's not for me to say. It's just where I would seek help and where we can increase those.
This is somewhat unrelated, but just going back to the question about honorarium there, just so everyone is aware, ASLI and the organization provides that not through policy or anything, but on one-offs to everything we do with groups in there, so it's not like we're not providing that to groups. We don't have a policy in that, but she's certainly addressing it.
Yeah, we have a motion to receive currently on the floor, and it could be voted on whenever the chair believes you're ready for that. And then I think there are some options listed in the staff report which the committee members may want to further consider.
So, motion to receive,
Currently on the floor.
currently on the floor? Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Chair Jack, I would make subsequent, I would move option, do you want them to be done separately? I would move option A and B written in the staff report. So that is that the committee recommend the regional district commit to developing a First Nations engagement framework as a formal action plan that supports reconciliation in alignment with the TRC calls to action and UNDRIP, and that the committee recommend the regional district pursue provincial and or federal funding programs to assist with the development of that.
Second.
Moved by Julie and seconded by Mark. Any discussion?
I just had a question. It seems like here at this committee, we were a little bit maybe puzzled by the word engagement, thinking that it meant one specific thing. I'm wondering if that is likely to have the same reaction at the board level, and if there's a recommendation from staff maybe on a different word that could be included, or if everyone here thinks that it's a fine word to carry on with, that's fine. I just noticed that it was something that we were wondering about, and I wondered at the board level, it might be easier to have a slightly different name. Oh, Julie hasn't.
I would take that as a friendly if you wanted to move an amendment to take the word engagement out of there and just leave it as.
Reconciliation.
I would like to amend it to calling it a First Nations reconciliation framework.
I'll second that.
So I was moved by Robin, seconded by Mark. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
So now there'll be a vote.
So we still have the main motion on the floor as amended, so. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
I think that does it for this item. I think that does it for this item.
So moving on.
Yep.
Where are we at now? 2024 schedule of committee meetings.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Robin. All in favor? Thank you.
And I'll move part E.
Julie moves part P. B,
Second.
seconded by Mark. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So with that, moving on to bylaws.
The next item we have is the under directors' reports, the First Nations participation.
Okay.
By Director Colburn.
Moving on to the director's report, First Nations participation in board meetings. Director Colburn will be introducing the motion concerning invitations to First Nations within the SRD to participate as non-voting members of the board.
Thank you, Chair. And so the motion I will make is that the committee recommend to the board that a formal letter be written to each of the nations within the SRD, inviting them to participate as non-voting members of the board. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. We've had a lot of conversation about this already, and it really disturbs me that there is no mechanism for non-treaty nations to sit here, but I think that that is the direction that things are going, is that the province's intent is to give a mechanism for those nations to participate here as voting members eventually. And so we know how long it took and how much effort it took on the nation's part and on our part to learn about each other and to try and come to a place where they were joining the board, where there was common ground, we had some knowledge and could have respectful and meaningful conversations within the limits of the legislation and the Local Government Act. So the intent with this is just to formalize that, to have another, push and say, please come learn. We want to learn about you. We want, there's a real need here and a want to at the Strathcona Regional District to forward this. We are better together.
Really appreciate Director Colburn's motion here. Could I maybe even take it one step further and, being at UBCM the recent UBCM in the fall, there was a question around whether the government is moving forward with providing First Nations with a way to participate as voting members as well, regardless of whether or not they've signed a treaty. And I'm wondering if the Strathcona District could take a leadership role in inviting the nations that are closest to having their treaty formed to actually join as voting members at this stage. Wondering what thoughts are.
I can answer that if you wish. That would be beyond our authority to do that, because the ability to vote at regional board meetings is set by the Local Government Act, and right now, only Treaty First Nations who have actually joined the board can actually vote on motions before the board. With respect to non-voting status, that is certainly something that the board can work on and invite other First Nations if it wishes. But we cannot at this time offer voting rights legally to those entities.
Question further to that, and we do have an ABICC coming up, and there is always UBCM, and I think it's beyond time that, I think that there have been other calls from other governments to do this. The work is moving forward, but I'm wondering if that's something that we want to take to ABICC, see if it gets through there, and then put through to UBCM as like, please, you're changing these legislative pieces. Let's get our Local Government Act in line so that we can do the work that we're sometimes already doing and continue on in a good way with a more informed decision, because that's what this is all about. Every decision that we make has ramifications on other bodies of government, and we need to all be at the same table and speaking that same language and be all on the same page. So.
Can staff remind us what is the deadlines for AVIC resolutions?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's very soon, yeah.
We'll get that. Not that all that stuff isn't important, and Julie, maybe Martin, you can support me on this as well. When KCFN was a non-voting member, it wasn't really their vote that influenced the board. It was a discussion and participation. So not that the vote isn't important and something we have to work towards, but participation on the board. We saw the board heavily influenced by the voice of the nation. So having them come here and participate, I think, is the most important part, and getting over the hurdle of the vote is important as well. But having them show up, their voice, I'm not sure if we ever had a non-voting resolution, but if we did, it was supported by the members, and that person didn't vote, in fact, but they influenced everybody. So having them show up is really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm willing to put forward a motion that staff prepare a resolution for AVICC that allows First Nations that are in Phase 3 or further treaty negotiations to be included as voting members on boards. Second.
Remind the director that we currently have a motion on the floor, which is shown on the screen right now. So I think following that,
Sure. Yeah, following that.
And Edith just said February 7th is the deadline for AVICC, so we're well within that.
And as one last piece to this, when I was crafting this resolution, that non-voting bothers me. But I think that transparency and explaining those reasons why in this formal letter, we want your participation, we want to hear your voice. This is the balance that we have to work in, but the conversation is what's important. Come, be a part, we want to learn, right? So.
I had a question for Julie about her motion, and if it would, how you would feel about changing within the SRD to saying within the administrative boundaries of the SRD, just to be clear that, because we have a very arbitrary line as a Strathcona Regional District drawn on lines, and we, like, I just don't really feel like that nations are within the SRD as much as they're within the boundaries of the administrative government, colonial government has drawn on a map.
I don't think, what two lines are you talking about?
2 lines.
No, but the administrative boundary is like we have a regional district boundary.
Yeah, the administrative
period.
boundary of the regional district.
How's that any different than another boundary? I don't get it. Like, are you thinking about there's 2 boundaries?
No, I'm more just thinking that I'm just being very mindful of the fact that the administrative boundary of the regional district was drawn on a map, but the nations that are here preceded that by thousands of years, and that it's sort of superimposed. The administrative boundaries are superimposed on this land.
might suggest just SRD boundaries. I don't know if that accomplishes or deals with the concern.
I have a better suggestion. The territories that the SRD boundaries lay on, that it's wordsmithing, but it may provide language that honors that we are on other people's territory. We are, so if there's something that could be worked through with that, I don't know what that looks like. Or so to each of the First Nations within the territories that the SRD encompasses, operates within, is that? That's okay with Director Davis, so that's just a friendly then. So that's not even amended, this is the original motion then.
You could remove within the.
Oh yeah, within the before territories? So, yeah, to each of the First Nations.
I think it should say whose territories the SRD operates within.
Yeah, maybe whose territories that the SRD operates, whose territories that the SRD operates within.
I don't know if the word that needs to be there, but that's granular.
Thank you. So with the changes there, before I go ahead, just a little comment on the non-voting members of the board and the participation from other nations. When we went through this whole process and becoming, starting with the SRD, we thought it would be beneficial to be a non-voting member in the beginning, just to bring, we have our concerns and So we thought it would be good to on that level, to come in, absorb everything, and then take it back, and then we can make a clear decision on if this is right for us and whatnot. So that part of them, and participating as a non-voting member was very beneficial for us and helped us in deciding on, we at that time, we voted Kevin and decided he was our go-to guy, and he did quite well, so. Just a little mention on that, and that part of being a non-member was very beneficial for us as a nation and learning this whole process here. Just thought I'd comment on that, and thank you. So we do have changes on the thing there, and so.
Yeah, I have a further comment. It's going back to what I'd mentioned previously about some sort of honoraria to eliminate any potential inhibitions against them attending. So I was wondering if I could offer a friendly amendment regarding that.
Maybe if you wouldn't mind, let's pass this resolution, and if you want to make a resolution about honorarium policy, we could probably draft something up and bring it.
Sure, that's fine if it's separate.
Okay.
So we're ready to move this motion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a subsequent that additionally we would offer an honorarium to members that would attend to remove any barriers to attendance.
And we want to report on what that policy might look like.
Maybe if I can, Director
And
Davis,
ask
at
for
staff
report.
prepare report on an honorarium policy.
That would make more sense.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll second that.
Was that Julie? Yes. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
I have a further motion. I'd like to make a motion that staff. You say slow down?
Slow down
Yeah.
for you.
Make a motion that staff prepare a resolution to bring forth to AVICC that makes a request to the provincial government to amend their legislation to allow Phase 3 or beyond treaty negotiation First Nation regional district boards. Municipal and RD, I would say.
Municipal councils and RD boards.
I'll second that as is.
What, to municipal too?
Should it say First Nations in there somewhere to allow First Nations currently in Phase 3 treaty negotiations and beyond? It just
First
doesn't
Nations
have the
in,
word, yeah.
Personally, I don't think that it should say that we're instructing staff to prepare a resolution to bring forth to AVICC. I think it should say that it's being brought forth to the board for consideration to be sent to AVICC.
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Yeah, and practically speaking on that, because the resolution date's February 7th, and we meet on the 24th, so we'll bring this to the board. If endorsed by the board, we'll just send that letter forward, because there won't be time to come back to the First Nations Committee.
Thank you, Director Dahl.
And I do want to speak to, I do think that it should be both, that it should be municipal and regional district boards. The problem I have is moving so slow. I think that this is I think that people of a nation can become councillors on any municipal. I don't think that we're not a body as the only kind of the difference between that. This is a body of a bunch of governments. And so I think this is where it is. Although I do, and we have in Zabalas, I mean, there's been people from nations that were council members, and we want more people from the nations to become council members so that we do have that lens and that perspective at the table and that innate historic information and experience. So that's why I said maybe not municipal.
Or you're saying no?
Yeah, because I don't think we can, yeah.
Okay, everyone's seen the motion, so all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That was everything on our agenda for today.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Terminate.
So just like that, it's over? Do we need to vote on it?
Yeah, just that quick.